Okay, so we'll get started. First of all, I would like to thank the brave souls, Meg Gorley and Gabi, for leaving your videos on. It's very nice to not be giving a cheer to myself. Anyone who's doesn't have their video on, also okay. But thank you very much. Thank you all for joining me. I know Sunday evening is a precious time, so I really appreciate everybody coming and being a part of it. And the cheer and the Orsum and everything doesn't happen without you guys. And I really, really appreciate you guys coming. So thank you. The other thank you that I wanted to give is to Gabi Resnick for putting together the amazing Orsum packet. She did a phenomenal job. She worked very hard. So Gabi, thank you so much. And also to my wife, who amidst being pregnant was there to particularly edit my sloppy writing pieces, but I think also some other writing pieces. So thank you very much, Danny and Gabi both. Okay, so I guess as an introduction, I'll just talk a little bit about this project, right? So we had this idea to do the Step It Up project for Elul. Elul is, I see Sarah Ehrlich on the line. Anyone who was on our September trip last year knows that that Elul is a very special time. Our September trip last year was during Elul, and basically every rabbi we heard from spoke about Elul. So for 2 weeks straight, we heard about Elul. And it's because Elul is such an amazing time. I actually heard an amazing story recently about a rabbi named Rabbi Shlomo Volbe, who was one of the character development giants of the last generation. And he was a master of personal growth and development. And when it was Elul one year, and one of his grandchildren gave birth. So they brought their great-granddaughter to Rav Shlomo Volbe, and they said, can you give us advice for a name? Do you have any insights? You know, naming in Judaism is very important. Do you have any insights for a great name that we can give our daughter? And he thought deeply. And he said, I think you should name her Elula, which is the female of Elul. Now, Elula isn't a name. It's not a Hebrew name. He just made it up. And he wasn't joking. He was just so deeply immersed. His whole world was so Elul that he actually, the advice that he gave them was actually to name her Elula. I share the story to give you guys a little bit of an insight into what this time is to those who really appreciate it. Elul is an amazing opportunity to finish the year, to begin the year, and ultimately just to grow as human beings. So that's why we were inspired to do this Elul Growth Project. Now, the idea here is that in this beautiful packet that Gabi made, there are practical exercises. And the idea is that we will give each of us, myself, and then Rabbi Evan next week, then Darren Resnick, who's on the call right now, and then Rabbi Hanan to finish it off. We'll give each of them will give a topic. And then as part of the lessons, there'll also be practical exercises for you to develop and actually make the learning real, because that's ultimately the point of the Torah and the point of the world, and that's the point of Elul, is not only to learn inspiring ideas, but to integrate it and to help you become a better person and to make it real. So that's the idea of the project. I hope it's going well, or it will go well, I should say. And from there, we'll kick off with my class. My topic is being present. If you click in the chat for you guys on the Zoom, I've put a Google Doc in the chat. Okay, this is a new style, a new style that I'm trying here of a class, which is to write a sheet with the points that I'm going over. And I'm going to basically give a shear and go through the points that are on that sheet. I thought to do this to give you guys the opportunity to see where I'm going and also see the points that I'm covering. I also happen to have linked a lot of the rabbis and a lot of the sources that I covered to links on the internet if you want to follow up. And if you want to take notes, just one quick tip is you can go to File in the top left corner and you can click Make a Copy if you would like, and that will make an exact copy of the document on your Google Drive. And on that copy, you'll be able to edit it and make notes if you so choose. That being said, let's do it. I'm actually going to share my screen as well. Okay. Okay, beautiful. Okay. I'll skip the blurb in the beginning. So the class I'm giving here is, why is it the present moment important? So I want to go back. There's no better place to start the class than with the purpose of life. The purpose of life, according to the Torah, is for you to actualize your potential as a human being. There are 5 words for a human being in the Torah. There's Adam, Enosh, Ish, and they have a ranking system. The lowest, Danny, I could just hear an echo from your phone. Can you maybe turn it down a little bit? No, it's okay, thank you. Okay, sorry guys. There's 5 words for a human being in the Torah. The lowest level of a human being is the word Adam, and the highest level of a human being is the word Ish. The word Adam is the same word as the word Adama. The word Adama means dirt, or it means earth. And the word Ish means fire. And this hints at a very deep idea, right? That a human being comes into the world, and Adam and Adama, raw potential. Dirt is inert. It's very physical in nature. It is filled with potential. It has the potential for life, but it doesn't actually have life yet. Whereas Ish, fire, is totally spiritual. It's totally actualized. Whereas Adam or Adama is potential, it's physical. So Ish, which is the same word as fire, is when you take matter and you light it up. It's physical, inert matter that has turned into energy. And that's our purpose of life. It's to go from physicality, which is not moving and it has a lot of potential, to actualized potential that's on fire and that's passionate. That's what the job of life is. Okay, that's the opening point. Point number 2 is, that's the job of life, but it's not so easy to do that. Now, Hashem made the system that in order to go through that process of going from potential to actualized, you have to earn it. And how do you earn it? Hashem created something called the Yetzer Hara. Now, I just want to see if you know what the Yetzer Hara is. Can you please do a thumbs up on the screen? I would love to get a sense of who knows what the Yetzer Hara is. Okay, so I'm going to explain the Yetzer Hara very briefly. The Yetzer Hara is essentially the voice in your head that's trying to get you to do the wrong thing. It's an amazing fact about life that our biggest enemy or our biggest obstacle is actually ourselves. And it's a funny thing that we all have a voice in our head that is trying to get us to do the wrong thing. So there's a voice in our head that wants us to not apologize when we've done something wrong. It tries to get us to hold a grudge. It gets us to smoke cigarettes. It gets us to hit the snooze button when we should be waking up. It gets us to online sports gamble when we know we shouldn't. It's whispering in our ear, you can't do it. It's whispering in our ear, you're not good enough. We all have one. That's what the Yetzer Hara does. So my question to you, and this is a kind of an interesting, weird question. If you were the Yetzer Hara, and your mission in life was to prevent a person from being their best self, to prevent a person from actualizing their potential, what would be your tactic? And I'm going to give you a minute to think about it. But imagine yourself the Yetzer Hara. Your job is to prevent this person from becoming the best version of themselves. How would you do it? So there are many tricks in the arsenal of the Yetzer Hara. There are many tricks. I've fallen prey to several, 10, sometimes hundreds on a given day. But one central trick of the Yetzer Hara that it tries to use is to make a person feel disempowered. It's to get a person to feel hopeless, to feel like they're a victim of circumstances, and feel like they're powerless to make a change. And I think one of the ways, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, the way that the Yetzer Hara tries to make a person feel disempowered is by getting you to focus on what you can't control. Because when a person thinks about and focuses on what they can't control in life, so the natural response is to feel out of control, to feel like a victim, to feel like you're at the whim of the world and there's nothing you can do. And that's a very disempowering feeling. It's a very demotivating feeling and experience. And it's one that ultimately causes despair and us to give up and to stop striving for growth. So the essential principle that I want you guys, and I think that is maybe the center point, maybe the most important thing I want you guys to get from tonight, is that the Yetzer Hara will try to get you to focus on things that are out of control, and it will prevent you from focusing on the things that are in your control. It's a classic move from the Yetzer, the old Yetzer. So there's an amazing thing that 2,000 years ago, which is a long time ago, the rabbis made a prediction. And they said that in our generation, there will be a time of incredible material prosperity. So there will be people who have money and comfort like they've never had before in life, which, by the way, is true. I once heard somebody put it beautifully that we today, the average person today, lives better than a king lived 200 years ago, which is an amazing point, right? A king of a nation, they didn't have electricity, they didn't have indoor plumbing, they didn't have avocados from Mexico and mangoes from Thailand and coconuts from Yugoslavia. They just didn't. And which is an amazing point. We today live in a materially blessed society. But the rabbi said something else very interesting, that amidst the backdrop of an incredibly prosperous material environment, so the Yetzer Hara will be out of control in the end final generation, which is our generation. And I think if you look in the world today, it's true. You know, this feeling of disempowerment, of people being compelled to focus on things that are outside of their control and feeling like victims and feeling powerless, it's rampant today. And you know, some examples I listed here, you know, things like anxiety about the future, which is the Yetzer Hara getting you to focus on something that is outside of your control. I saw an amazing thing that 20 years ago, the average onset of anxiety was 23%. It was in the mid-20s. It was maybe 23 or 24. As of a couple years ago, which is to say in 20 years' time, the average onset had dropped from 24 to 14. So the average onset of anxiety that people are suffering from today is happening much quicker and in much greater numbers. At the same time, there's a feeling of shame about the past, a feeling of not being able to let things go that have happened in the past, you know, to be stuck in the past. Another example of this, of the Yetzer Hara being really strong, is being distracted and having an inability to concentrate, which is rampant today. It's absolutely rampant. And very ubiquitous. This is kind of a more simple one, but the feeling of starting a new project or a goal, and then just the inability to see it through. And then, you know, general feeling of disempowerment. So these are things that the rabbis said 2,000 years ago. For whatever reason, they said that in our time, there's going to be incredible material wealth, but the Yetzer Hara will be very strong. And this will be the general sentiment amongst people, that they will be battling these things in very, very real ways, which I think is true. Okay, so that's really all an introduction, right? that our purpose here is to become the best people possible. It's to go from potential to being on fire, to being passionate, to being very much alive. We have something called the Yetzer Hara that's trying to prevent us from that. And the way it does it is to get us to focus on the things that we can't control to make us feel disempowered. So the question becomes, what then can we do to become more empowered? How do we combat the Yetzer Hara? You may have guessed it. I think that an essential way to combat the Yetzer Hara and to live life more fully and to overcome anxiety and to overcome shame and to overcome feelings of disempowerment and live an empowered, happy, fulfilling life is to learn how to become present, to learn how to embody the present moment. Because the present moment is the area of our maximum influence. When we think about the future and we think about the past, so we are dwelling on things that we can't change. A lot of the times, sometimes, we can think about the future in a thoughtful way, and sometimes we can think about the past in a helpful, thoughtful way. But most of the time, people are stuck thinking about the future and stuck thinking about the past in a way that is very disempowering. When we bring our attention to the now, which is where life is happening, life is only happening now. There is the future and the past, they're actually kind of made up in our own minds. And life is really happening now. And when we feel the now, so we feel empowered, so we can actually do things and change things. There's a story here, just this first point about the importance of the present moment. So in the 15th century, there was a prisoner who was in jail, and he got leave for one day. The prison said you can have one day to leave the prison and you could be a free man and you can practice Torah. So it's a very interesting question. He wrote a letter to the leading rabbi of the time, the Radbaz, and he said to him, told him the situation, and he said, what day should I leave? Should I leave on Friday night so I can make Kiddush? Should I leave on Rosh Hashanah so I can hear the shofar? Should I leave on Yom Kippur so I can fast? So the Radbaz wrote back a very interesting answer. He said you should leave the next day possible. Even if it's a weekday, you should leave the next day possible. And I think in that story, there's an appreciation for the present moment, and that you never know what the future will hold, and that the present moment is where things are happening. It's where life is happening. So take the first moment you can get. There's another great story about a Hasidic rabbi named Rabbi Moshe of Kabrin. When he passed away, so another Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, went to his followers, the followers of Rabbi Moshe of Kabrin, and said, tell me about your Rebbe. Tell me something awesome about your Rebbe. What was his greatness? So that his Hasidim said something very interesting. His followers said, there is nothing in particular that really stood out about our Rebbe, about Rabbi Moshe of Kabrin. There was nothing amazing about him, except for the fact that whatever he did, he was totally there. Whatever he was doing, he was absolutely 100% there. Did you guys lose my screen? Still have it?
No, we've got it.
Okay, thank you very much. So they said that his great quality was the ability to be present. And so we see there is an art form to being in the present, and it's a beautiful, beautiful skill. And the ability to be present, and to, when you're eating, be eating, and when you're learning, to be learning, and when you are crying, to cry, is an amazing skill, because you are connected to the reality of now. The only real reality is the present moment. So the second point that I want to talk about is the word today in Hebrew. The word today in Hebrew is hayom. Now, a literal translation of Hayom means the day. And it's an amazing idea that today is the day. In Hebrew, today is the day. There is one day, and it's today, and it's right now. This day is the life, is life. That's where life is happening. Life isn't happening in the past. It's not happening yesterday, and it's not happening tomorrow. Today is the day. There's a famous rabbi, the Chafetz Chaim. Well, I'll say in the verse of Shema, it says, which I will go to right here. It says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levivcha u'v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. You should love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. V'hayu hadavrim ha'ele asher anoichi mitzavecha hayom. Take to heart these instructions which I charge you to this day. So the maybe straightforward way of understanding it is that is the day being referred to there in the Torah as the day of the giving of the Torah. The Chafetz Chaim says something very interesting and a bit creative. He says that today, when the Torah says in the Shema to be careful with the mitzvahs today, the Torah is talking about today, because the only day that is ever real is this day right now. And to focus on today. Every day, says the Chafetz Chaim, you have to wake up and realize that you've been given a day and you only have this day. The next point is Rabbeinu Yonah, who lived in the 13th century, who made a statement about teshuvah, which is also right for this time. And he said the following thing. The foundation of teshuvah is considering today as the day you were born, the first day of your life. You have no demerits or merits. And when you can end, that's for Rabbeinu Yonah the key for teshuvah. Because if you're thinking about your demerits and all the things you've done wrong, so then a piece of you is stuck in the past and you're unavailable for the present moment. And if you are thinking about your merits, about all the good things you've done, so that might cause you to rest on your laurels and become a bit complacent or a bit arrogant, and you also won't totally be in the present moment. And what we need, if we want to come back to who we really are, which is the real meaning of teshuvah, but that's another topic, is to be here, be today. Okay. So the next 2 points, I want to talk about maybe the futility of looking in the past and also looking in the future. Okay, so point number 3 is the unhelpfulness of regret. I think oftentimes, the point I really want to get across is that I think regret is a trap. Oftentimes we regret things out of a sense of our morality and a sense of nobility. We think that by regretting something, we're in a certain sense making amends for it, or we're doing something moral, which is, I think, to a certain point true. It is good to have a sense of right and wrong and to regret bad things, but it's a trap to spend too much time looking at it. The metaphor that I came up with was, if you are driving in a car, so the rear view mirror is very helpful, but only if you don't stare at the rear view mirror. If you can't take your eyes off the rear view mirror, so then it's very dangerous. So I think it's the same is true with looking at our past. It could be very useful to look back time and time again, but I think it's really dangerous to be transfixed on the past and to be stuck there. And if you can't look forward, so then ultimately looking in the past becomes not helpful. Along those lines, this Rabbi Yechezkel Levenstein, who was alive very recently, said the following: if thinking about what you've done in the past causes you to feel sad, your obligation is to keep those thoughts out of your mind. And I think the place that he's coming from is that the Torah is demanding of us to be creators and to be optimistic. And it's very hard to create and feel empowered and be our best selves if we are stuck feeling sad about past mistakes. I feel very awkward speaking with no responses, but I'll just keep going. Hope you guys are enjoying. Okay, point number 4, the trouble with anxiety. So that point was the danger of looking in the past. I want to now talk about the danger of dwelling too much in the future. So everyone has anxiety. Everyone's dog has anxiety in the 21st century. This is the reality we live in. There's two points I want to make about anxiety. The first one is it's not helpful. We're oftentimes anxious about a problem or something that's about to come in the future. And the truth is, worrying about it doesn't make it any better. So it's similar to the kind of having too much regret, where you have to think about, I think, is this action actually doing anything productive? And oftentimes when we're anxious and when we are worrying about something in the future, we think it will help us solve it or help us deal with the problem. But most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time it just exhausts us, and we are in no better place to actually deal with what comes when it comes. Now, the truth is, if there's something in the future that is dangerous or difficult, whenever it comes, it will come. And you'll either deal with it or you won't. And so the truth is, anxiety is not very helpful. On this point, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who lived in the 1800s, said what I think is a great line: all worries are forbidden, except when one worries about his worrying. If you worry too much, you're allowed to worry about that, but you're not allowed to worry about anything else. The second point that I want to bring up is that anxiety is oftentimes not accurate. Oftentimes we paint this whole big picture about what's going to happen and this whole dramatic catastrophe in our heads. And the truth is, most times things work out, and we never know what the future holds. There's a great story here. It's in the Talmud. You can click this link if you want to see it inside, as they say. I'll say it outside now. The story goes as following. Rabbi Akiva who was one of the most famous rabbis from the 1st century, his rabbi was a rabbi named Nachum Ish Gamzu, which means his rabbi was a rabbi named Nachum, the man who said, this is also good. And Rabbi Akiva was trained to say, this is also good. That was his life philosophy. Whenever something came up, he said, this is also good. So there's a story that one night he was traveling on the road, he was very tired, and he got to an inn. And he says, do you guys have room for a weary rabbi? I'm very tired. And they said, sorry, we're full, take a hike. So he said, what would most of us say? It's not fair, we would start complaining, etc., etc. Rabbi Akiva says, okay, this is also for the good. So he goes and he sets up a little camp in the forest. And he had with him, he had a candle to learn Torah at night. He had a rooster and he had a donkey. So in the middle of the night, the wind blows and blows his candle out. A cat comes and eats his rooster. And then a lion comes and eats his donkey. And Rabbi Akiva says, this is also for the good. Okay, so later on that night, an opposing army came into the lands. And they went to the inn and they slaughtered everybody in the inn. And they most certainly, as they were coming on the road, they would have seen Rabbi Akiva from his candle, or they would have heard his donkey, or they would have heard his rooster. And the point is, you never really know how things will end up. So oftentimes when we're anxious about something, we have in our mind that things are going to end up a certain way, that is going to be bad or difficult or scary or painful. And maybe one thing we can do to try to combat that is to remember that we never know how things end up. And even when things look really bad, sometimes it's for the best. There's a similar story about from Rabbi Aaron Cutler, who was a rabbi in the 1900s in America. And he sent somebody on a mission to Europe. And so he went on a mission to Europe, and he had a flight home, and the flight home crashed. So his wife got a telegraph from the military that said, the plane crashed, your husband was on it, he, very sorry to inform you, has passed away. So Rabbi Aaron Cutler, she went to Rabbi Aaron Cutler and said, am I allowed to start sitting Shiva now? Because I just got news that my husband passed away. So Rabbi Aaron Cutler said to her back, said, we know from the Torah that anybody who goes on a mission for a mitzvah is protected. So it can't be that your husband died. Wait a couple days. So she waited 1 day, 2 days, and 3 days later, her husband called her and said that he was alive, and said that he was on a stop. When he was on his way back, he had made a stopover, and he himself had to say Kaddish for somebody in his family who had passed away several years earlier on that day. And so he went to make a minyan, and then he made the minyan to say Kaddish, and then he missed his connecting flight, which was the flight to come back. And he was protected. So it's a crazy story, but I think one of the morals of the story is that you never know. You know, you can always be worried and anxious about the future, but the truth is we never know how it's going to turn out. Even something like missing a flight can seem disastrous, and sometimes it's the best thing in the world. Okay, going to the next point. Point number 5 is those are some traps of the Yetzer Hara, is to get us to be disempowered, to dwell in the future, to dwell in the past. How do we live, and what's an empowered mindset? So there's a great quote here by Rabbi Yechezkel Abramsky. He says, view each day as if it's the page in a book of your autobiography. What an awesome mindset to have. If you think about the potential we have the power to write our own story. And it's an amazing thing to keep in mind. If you feel dragged down by the past, if you feel like you're worried about the future, try to remember that the page you're on in your story is today, and that you are the author. The Yetzer Hara will try to tell you that you're a reader of the book, that you can only read what happens. But the truth is that you are a creator and you are an author, and you're the author of your own autobiography. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who we mentioned before, there's a great line. Somebody once asked him, what's your favorite page in all the Talmud? What's your favorite page? So his answer was, the one I'm learning right now. Because for him, it was real. That's the page that was alive for him. He was connected to life. It was happening in front of him. That was his page. That's his favorite page. Thirdly, there's a famous line from Pirkei Avos, which is, I think, an all-time great. It is beautiful, right? If I am not for myself, who is for me? But if I am only for myself, what am I? And then the beautiful part, last part, if not now, when? It's a Mishnah of empowerment. If I'm not for myself, who is for me? If I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? Life is happening now. If you can connect to that fact, you will be in a ocean of empowerment. Okay, the last point I want to make is a personal thought that I've been having about my sweet daughter, Sophia Leah, which is children have an amazing ability to be in the present moment. It is awesome. When they are sad, they are totally sad. And then they get over it. And then when they're happy, they're so happy. And then they're out of it. But they have this amazing ability to be in the present moment that I think we should aspire to. a lot of us get caught in things and we're thinking about something that happened to us, 19 years ago, where, we're thinking about, what our kid will look like with the husband we haven't met yet. We're so distracted and scattered that we miss life happening right in front of our face. And it prevents us from really being as happy as we can be and as engaged as we can be and focused as we can be and get the most out of life as possible. Just to tell a funny story on this point, I was talking to my wife earlier, and she told me the story that her and her sister Lauren went to the doctor with my nephew Yoni to get his shots. He was getting shots for some sort of vaccination when he was a young kid. And my wife said that the doctor gave him his shot and he started crying. And then Lauren started crying. And then Danny started crying. And then everyone in the room was crying. And then they looked down and Yoni had stopped crying, but Lauren and Danny were still crying. So it's like Yoni gets a shot. He has this traumatic experience and then he's fine. And then being, a bit older, Lauren and Danny are stuck in they're in that, for them, my wife might still be traumatized, So children have this amazing ability. On this point, Rabbi Nachman, who lived in the 18th century, said something amazing. He says, it's asur lezaken, which means it's prohibited to get old. For a lot of rabbis out there, it's prohibited to eat milk and meat together, and it's prohibited to wear linen and wool. And it's true, those things are prohibited. Please don't mistake my words. Rabbi Nachman wants to drive home a point. In the same way that those things are prohibited, so is it prohibited to get old. To get old in your mindset, to start losing touch with the present moment, to start letting the scar tissue of life get between you and life, to let the traumas of the past and the anxieties about the future shroud and get in the way of your ability to feel empowered by the moment. Okay. Moving to that's really all I have in terms of ideas. In terms of making it real, this is my suggestion for the week ahead. It's an interesting thing. There's an interesting word. It's called should. And the word should is a funny word because whenever we use it, we are really saying how we think life should have been or should be. But that's really our insistence of how life should turn out or should have turned out. And in a certain sense, it's by definition disconnected from the present moment of what is. So the practical exercise for the week is to try to catch yourself saying should 2 times per day. Either should in the future, I should do that, or I should XYZ, or in the past, I should have blah, blah, blah. And whenever you catch yourself saying the word should, you'll know that was me leaving the present moment. And my advice to you at that point in time is to come back to just come back to the present moment. And one very helpful trick for coming back to the present moment is to just breathe and to connect to your breath. Because the breath is always happening in the present moment. You cannot breathe in the past and you cannot breathe in the future. Whenever you are breathing right now. There's an amazing thing in Hebrew. The word neshima, which means breath, is the same word as neshama, which means soul. And I think perhaps one way of explaining that is that when we are, in order for our soul to really shine forth and for us to be in that actualized state, it can only happen in the present moment. Maybe you could say. If you look in your beautiful Orson packet, so you'll see there is a chart where you have the ability to fill that in. So I highly encourage you guys to do it. And if you look in the back of the page, there's some practical exercises by a rabbi named Rabbi Dov there, who some of you know from our Orson trips. He's amazing. and we included some exercises from him about being present. So one of them for him is spending time alone in solitude. One of them is learning how to make blessings. Another one is learning to just kind of be mindful in general. So that's what we have for you guys on the practical front. That's what I have for you on the conceptual being in the present moment front. Thank you for tuning in. Are there any questions?
I have a question, David. If you always find yourself like saying, just say it's like you're constantly saying, I should do this, but it's the same thing over and over again, does that necessarily mean you should do it?
Can you give me an example?
Sorry, that was so vague. Like, just say, I don't know, there's something in your life that you don't know whether you should or don't do. So you just leave it in your head. But then you're conscious, you catch yourself like throughout the day, your conscious tells you that you should do that thing. Is that necessarily enough to justify you doing it? Is your conscious telling you to do something enough to justify you doing it?
It's a good question, Rivka. So I think that voice can be coming from the Yetzer Tov or the Yetzer Hara. I think both, it depends. So I would say that you need to be very analytic with examining exactly where that voice is coming from and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. But I would say that if it is happening a lot, if you have the same recurring voice that keeps saying should, so my advice would be to like really turn towards that voice and confront it and really like think about it. Why does this voice keep saying should, and why do I think that way? And really like, because whether it's a good thing to do it or a bad thing to do it, it's if it's incessant, so it probably means that it needs to be it needs attention.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, guys, thank you for tuning in.
Thanks, David.
Bit awkward for me on Zoom, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have, I would love to hear feedback about the style of the class, having that sheet open for you guys to go through. I know whenever I ask somebody to, like a group of people who have given a class to give me some feedback, no one ever does. So I'm assuming you won't, but if you do find the time and you have a particular something that was noteful, something you liked, something you didn't like, I'm very much looking for feedback. Please, please, please message me. You can get an anonymous number if you're embarrassed or not. But anyways, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Dave.
Good luck. I'm giving a follow-up class on Thursday,
Thank
which is
you.
next step.
Thank
Pleasure. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Danielle.